Start the recording.
You're good, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Donna Dupree. I work in the Department of Planning and Zoning. I'm a plan reviewer in the Division of Land Development. My chief, Anthony Cataldo, normally would be giving this introduction, but he's out today. First of all, we want to thank all of you for making the time to come down, especially in person today, to help us work on this landscape manual update. This is the second of 3 focus groups that we're holding. And basically the focus groups are phase 1 of a 3-phase project that we're going to do. The second phase is going to be more gathering information. And then the third phase will be writing drafts. So any input you give us today or anything that you think of later, please use that landscape manual at howardcountymd.gov email. We are monitoring that, and my colleague Jason is keeping a good spreadsheet of all of your comments that were received so far. Just a couple housekeeping things. Please make sure you've signed in and have your contact information on the sign up sheet by the door. The virtual attendees will remain muted, so please use the chat box to send us your comments, and Jason and I will be monitoring that. At any time, you can send additional comments to landscapemanual@howardcountymd.gov. And thank you to those that have already sent in some comments. We're already receiving comments. I'm going to turn it over now to our consultant, Site Resources. They're going to lead the group today. We have Kevin Riley, Emily Anderson, and Ro Rubio. Thank you.
Hello, thanks again for coming. Just wanted to quickly go over the meeting format, and then I'd love it if we could go around the room and just introduce ourselves so we know who's who. And so today's meeting is going to be where we're going to get your guys' comments. We're going to give you guys sticky notes for different prompts, and you may have, I don't know if everyone had a chance to see some example prompts that Anthony might have sent out yesterday, or Donna. If not, they'll also be up on the screen. And those are really just examples. Tried to kind of group similar type of questions together, but feel free to, there's gonna be, certainly the last category is anything that we might have missed. So if don't hold back on any of your comments, but we are kind of gonna have a little bit of categories to start. Once you have your comment written down, we'll just stick it up on the landing zone for that category, and then we'll read them out so everyone can hear them. Please put your name on the comments, because if we have any questions that we want to follow up with you on for more information or clarity, or if we think you have a great comment and we really want to expand on that information, we want to be able to know who to contact. And then we'll just repeat for the different categories. So once again, I'm Emily Anderson with Site Resources. I'm Ro Rubio.
Kevin Riley, Principal Landscape Architect with Site Resources.
Oh yes, and if you don't mind mentioning if you're an engineer or LA or what your role is in your firm as well. We start?
Sure. I'm John Carney from Benchmark. We do civil engineering.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Next thing.
Jen Mullen for Fisher Collins and Carter. I'm the project manager.
Okay.
I'm Jen Gant from Fisher Collins and Carter. I'm a designer project manager.
And I'm Miguel Irola, principal with Ford Copeland Mock Architects, Planners, Landscape Architects.
Start in front of that.
So I'm
Yep.
Courtney Gallagher with Morris and Rich Associates. I'm a landscape architect and an associate with the firm.
Gil Rogers, also with Morris and Ritchie Associates, landscape designers.
Nishi Tringo with Northern Bellender. We do engineering work, and I'm a project manager and designer.
Hi, I'm Joanne Carey. I'm with Civil Engineering Group. I'm a landscape architect.
Hi, Edward Tom, a landscape architect at BMW Daphne King Walker.
Steve Zader, landscape architect with St. John Properties, assistant vice president of landscape planning.
Hi, good afternoon. Daniel Park with Bowler, planner and landscape architect.
Eric McWilliams from Bowler, project manager and landscape architect.
Wonderful. I also forgot to say I'm a landscape architect designer with Site Resources and Row is as well. So if anyone has, does anyone have any questions before we get started? No? Oh, yeah, so we have this up just as as sure you guys are probably well aware that the manual is getting quite outdated at this point. The last, I guess, published update was in 2010 with some of the landscape planting recommendations. So we are excited to help out the efforts, and it's good to have you guys here to get started on that. Kevin is handing out, and I can row them and grab them together. So the first category, rough category that we wanted to get your input on is what no longer works. So open-ended questions, specific things, just to get your thoughts started if you don't already have a list in mind. What no longer works or makes sense based on current design, development, or environment? What issues are you seeing out in the field that are a direct result of the manual's requirements? Are there landscape manuals? This one would be, I think, of particular interest coming from you guys. Would be, are there landscape manuals from other jurisdictions that you think work well? And if so, there's specific parts or sections or something about the manual that seems to be successful from your perspective. Are there specific items or issues related to certain project types that need to be addressed differently in the manual? Getting into a specific question, as an example, is how does the stormwater management area in the landscape section need to be altered to address ESD stormwater management facility types versus the traditional, larger ponds types from the past? They were more common in the past. Are there particular plant species proposed on drawings that are problematic in stormwater management facilities? Or any recommendations you would have? And that's really the overarching question there, is what no longer works. If there's something outside of these, please feel free to include those in your thoughts. And we're keeping these and so that we can record them and get them added into the database of other comments that we have. So we have a couple minutes to jot some things down. Okay. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Whenever you're done with your comment, just get that sticky note all the way on the left sheet over here. I'll start reading those out once a few of them get up there.
I'm just gonna remind the folks that are logged in online, we do have the chat box open. If you have comments to send in, please use the chat box in WebEx.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start reading some of them out, as you guys are finishing up, in case it jogs anyone's memory or mind for any other additional ones.
Okay, so the manual needs to address the different planting needs for stormwater management ponds currently covered in the manual versus ESD facilities. So yes, fantastic point. Specific by type. Many other jurisdictions don't have specific requirements. For ESD facilities, but identify pond requirements as a distinct.
Sorry, landscapes are.
Oh, landscape requirement.
Yeah.
So you're saying many other jurisdictions do or do not?
They don't
get
actually,
specific
and a lot of the other ones
requirements?
work and they don't, they specify that ESC facilities must be planted, they don't dictate a certain quantity of plants per square foot, or there's no requirement, but they do make a distinction between pond screening versus stormwater
Sure.
ESD facility.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Lots are getting smaller and pushed toward the public streets area for landscape has decreased. Forest conservation has become much more of a driving force on the site design. Specimen trees require design changes and design conflicts with utilities. Do you think of other design changes? for specimen trees?
I think it'd be nice if they could be just considered a credit, for multiple landscape trees, because, these are 50, 60, 70-foot tall trees. They provide everything that we want them to, but maybe they're not right on the perimeter, 20 feet off of the public street. Because we can't put them 20 feet off the public street because they'd be hitting the critical root zones. So some sort of credit for retention specimen trees would be great.
And along those lines, maybe incentives.
Yeah.
There probably should be some incentives in there to do something above and beyond in order to
Sure.
do
That's a
something
good
else.
point. Yeah, other than forest conservation requirements, there's not a whole lot of motivation for a developer to preserve that tree.
Wow.
And multiple pronged approach to conserving them. Great point. Coordination with ESD and stormwater management regs and practices. Buffer yards are kind of dumb. Separate uses, only useful with noxious use screening. Street plantings should complement street types, rural versus urban, general to suburban. Excellent. Can you say more about,
What, buffer yards are dumb?
you?
Well, they are. I mean, and I get it why it came about, because Columbia was all about separating uses. And I think that's where probably this buffer yard notion came about with it. But it's kind of ridiculous, kind of, if you're trying to separate uses or move towards a more urbane county, then it's less about separating uses and more about mixing uses.
Yeah.
So therefore, why would you put, and they create barriers, especially when you're trying to create interconnectivity, especially on a long arterial street or whatever, where you have limited access.
Yeah. Great.
Then you can't connect the parcels because of these ridiculous grade changes and buffer yards.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have had, a lot of you have had the same experience, but the challenges between school security and SEPTA concepts and the old school screen the dumpster area or screen the service part of the school is a huge challenge.
While you mentioned schools, you should have them be subject to all these risks too, and any other civic building. Because just, you look at our schools, they're horrible from a landscape standpoint. They really are horrible. They look like, you know, office buildings or something, you know, and they really ought to be subjected to landscape regs and not be like grandfathered or whatever.
That's the first time that's come up actually in this conversation, but great points. Thank you.
Prince George's County, new landscape manual, digital works well with easier navigation. For example, table of contents can be clicked on to take you to the right specific section. Which is a good point. Also, they have definitions for specific terms embedded in the text. So if you have over, or you call over a word or phrase, the definition will appear in the pop-ups.
Are there any others that you guys think? Yeah, feel free to.
Yeah,
Say, do you-
Sorry, hold you.
Yeah, sorry. So I think the buffer yard widths are vague in this county for the most part. I mean, there's kind of a prescriptive 20 foot, and no one abides by that. It's really, then you go to the zoning code and it's based on the parking lot setback. So I'd like to have something more concrete. If you don't eliminate your buffer yards, to have, you know, like a 20 foot for residential next to commercial, or, you know, a 10 foot between parking and the right of way. Something that's tangible. To work on.
So you're saying that the way that it's written now is unclear, it's vague, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the manual, alludes to a 20 foot buffer, but having worked on dozens of sites in Howard County, very rarely does a 20 foot buffer come up. And when it has, it's been kind of a problem. It's been community opposition where the site's already designed and they're like, but look on, you know, in the manual, and then that pulls up the 20 foot and then you're kind of reworking it. So to have something concrete saying if this is your use against this use, you need this side buffer. Now, that negates the fact that where you go buffer free, and that's more your urban areas. So that's really getting more nitty-gritty into your landscape manual, but to have something that says this is going to be urban, and we don't want buffers here because we're looking at mixed use, but this is more of a standard suburban residential area where we do want to have buffers between single families and towns or towns and commercial.
Excellent.
And then the commercial parking lots would be my second. So it's 1 tree per 20 parking spaces, which is really sparse. And I don't know of another county in the state at this point that has such a low quantity of trees required for parking spaces. So being that Columbia is always kind of the, you know, the heart of vegetation and trees and buffers, et cetera, it might be good to increase that. The next one was just kind of the buffer yards, commercial to residential. And then I love the Baltimore County landscape manual. Prince George's County, I understand the electronic version is very nice to work with. It's insane. So I just want to try to pull that off the table. That's a template at all.
You're a
one
fan
was
of Baltimore County.
I'm a fan of the Baltimore.
Okay.
They also allow more flexibility in their design, so you can work out the plant unit quantities, and then you can take it and put it where it makes the most sense.
Work it out, Jim.
Yeah, I don't like the planting units at all. I don't like that you convert to a number and then convert back to the plant. It's like just, I like how Howard County has it. You know, shade trees are worth 1, evergreens are worth, am I getting it wrong, 2, 1?
Yeah.
Shrubs, you know, and where you have to convert it to a PU, and then you have to quantify everything, and then you have to convert it back, so you make sure you have the counts right, and yeah, it's a little just extra step that I wrote down that I would not follow that.
I would add this, though, that the Baltimore County planning unit, the Prince George's County planning units, they are prescriptive, you know. Prince George is 1 shade trees 10, Baltimore County 1 shade trees, you know, 1.
Yeah.
But when you get into Howard County, you've got certain, you could take like 1 shade tree equals 2 ornamentals, but two evergreens, like they don't mix and match.
Yeah.
There's kind of a break in it.
To get your point, where we, I'm sorry, Emily, I don't want to-
No, go for it.
But
No, this is good.
the I would personally like the flexibility of saying, okay, in Baltimore County, shade tree is a planting unit. Shrubs might be, I can't remember, it's 5 or 10, whatever, but depending on your site, you can work as a designer and use those numbers to create some. And to Miguel's point, maybe you have an urban site that works well, where you have more shrubs in your buffer as opposed to, and walkways and pedestrian connectivity and commercial lines of sight, as opposed to screening, the back of the shopping center from a residential side where you might want.
But you can still do that here.
Right.
You
So,
just,
I'm sorry, your preference was for the Baltimore County way of quantifying the units or?
Howard County.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, you
Just
can
wanna make
still do it. I didn't like the way that you have to convert to a planting
Yeah,
unit
okay,
and then
gotcha.
back again to get your quantities on your plant list and, it's just a little extra work.
Yeah, understood.
But just to recap what I was saying, so 2 small deciduous trees can be substituted for 1 shade tree. 2 evergreen, 1 shade tree. There's 10 shrubs for 1 shade tree or 1 evergreen. So an evergreen, which is worth half of a shade tree, is 10 shrubs regardless of whether it's a shade tree.
Whole paradox.
Yeah, that is always talked to the man.
Okay.
Sorry, this may be changing the subject a little bit. It's going back about 5 minutes or more, and I didn't put this on a little sticky note, but you mentioned septic, and that's all about safety for children and youth and young people. It's about allowing police to drive by on the adjacent road and look in and say, and as you know, our landscape manuals are all about screening and buffering. So you've got these 2 forces that are just, in really opposite.
Yeah.
So if you point about schools, one, they don't want to spend money on the shrubs near the building in case someone gets drugged behind the shrub and something bad happens. And the same thing applies, to dumpsters and to, you really want to rely on people looking in from the road for safety. Or looking in from adjacent residents for safety, people that live around the site. On the other hand, if you opaque that view off, with, evergreen trees, for example, where you've got these 2 forces that are opposite. So anyway, I just thought, I throw that out before I forgot it.
It's a very good point. And in Baltimore County, we work with them, we do a fair amount of schoolwork in Baltimore County and have constantly had this challenge on those projects where the entitlements process saying you need to screen all this stuff, where the school is saying, we don't want to screen any of this stuff, and neither does the community. So, challenges working that out.
Yeah, it'll show up on one of the next slides.
Sorry if I got
No,
out of
you're
order.
good.
So another item that I have that's not working, Schedule A that's in the manual, I have been asked by reviewers to add another column, even though it's not specific in the landscape manual, to tally things in the right hand to what's required, what's provided, and then give totals. So that's really specific to
Fair enough.
Howard County Landscape Manual. And the way that, how we note things underneath there, when things are, trees can't fit on one perimeter and then the transfer to another, just, if there's a better way to kind of communicate that, it can get really wordy, doing that.
I'll piggyback on that, but I talk about. But when we're dealing with cost estimates, it's wavered. There's no consistency. Sometimes it's with the plant material as required. Sometimes it's plant material as provided. It would be good to have some sort of concrete consistency with that, so we don't do that.
Yeah, I've dealt with that recently on our Baltimore County projects, and we've had to separate the plants on 2 different plans, or have one full one for the contractor to do their installation on, and then the one that's the final landscape plan that gets the cost estimate attached to it. So I hear you there. Clarity would be good.
One last thing I'm not a big fan of formulaic codes, and, because it's all about Bean County. We're talking about landscape planting here. In my mind, I think that, a lot of this design aspects ought to be negotiated. Certainly with planning staff and all that, because the formulas are a little confusing at times, and they shouldn't be. 5th graders should be able to look at the code and read it and decipher it, but instead you need someone with the MLA to figure it out. So I'm not a big fan, frankly, of that. When you look at Montgomery County, for example, you know, and I would say that the quality of landscape in Montgomery County is very, very high. They don't have a landscape manual at all. It gets negotiated with planning staff, so it's something to think about.
About another set of notes or
I do, but just to kind of continue the conversation here. So just my background, I practiced in Montgomery County for the last 15 years. Last time I practiced in Howard was 15 years ago. So coming on with the perspective of open space types, like for instance in Montgomery County, there's different types of open space and recommendations from a landscape perspective on that. It's not prescriptive, it's really just a broad recommendation. So for instance, common open space for townhouses or public open space for more urban multifamily type of development. You know, those are different types of spaces and recommendations specific to that. And then of course there's many open spaces, you know, whether it be on structure or around the perimeter, but just a thought that came to mind. I'm not sure if the zoning ordinance addresses that from a landscape perspective. Also, having worked in the city of Rockville, they're very specific as to the requirements for setbacks and utilities, BUDs, and especially in a compact urban type of thinking townhouses. You know, it was clear as to what those requirements were. Not sure that those were captured in here or if there's any recommendations there. So just some thoughts.
I don't mean to be argumentative, but I know we both mentioned outlining specific setback depths. I think it would be good to be clear in the manual, but I actually think it should go the other way. Be clear that the width is not prescribed and it is more maybe plant-based. And then, you know, if it's depending on maybe building setbacks or parking setbacks, you know, that could be closer in certain areas or farther away or provide less room for landscaping in one place and more room in other places. Gives you more, flexibility instead of it's got to be 15 feet the whole way and it maybe doesn't make sense in, you know, this portion of the site. So I think I would prescribe it as, you know, specific, but more like, you know, a set amount of plant material.
Just on the stormwater management bio plans, that those plant selections have to come from the Maryland stormwater management landscape list, plant list in the back, according to DED. I mean, that's who we get that from. And then,
You get that from DED in specific to.
yes. And then deer resistance and protection for those plants that are in the bios. I've gone out, inspected bio after it's been planted and it's been eaten. So and DD just goes, they don't know what to say. I mean, so I don't know how, and that's kind of not landscape manual stuff. That's more DED stuff. That would be something that I would suggest is maybe specifying some deer protection the way that we do for forest conservation. Because deer are a problem here in Downey County.
don't feel All right. So if you don't mind, Ro, will you grab any, could you write some of those down, or at least like get the, you know, bullet points down on those, and then we will. There we go. Yeah, wait a minute. No, you're good. You wanna take one, pass it around. So some of these might overlap, some of these you might have already hit. But the general category here is what is missing. Are there any landscape edge types or landscape conditions missing or too vague? Some of those have been addressed by some comments already. Which unique situations aren't addressed in the manual that you think should be? What needs further explanation? What are your recommendations for clarity? So if there's anything that hasn't been addressed already in the room. What additions to the manual will be helpful? For example, checklists for or more, or other sketches and examples, formatting like bulleted lists versus paragraphs, or similar to the comment about the preference for the, the digital version in the other county. Are there specific resources you would like included in the manual? Links to specific native plant databases, or specific, if there's requirements by the county, would you like that to be linked? Or forms or processes for requesting approval for alternate solutions, or anything that you maybe come up against that, especially if you have any new people in the office who are wondering like, well, how do I go about this unique situation that's not covered? Anything else like that, any appendices or other specific information that you've been told maybe by the county reviewers that you'd like, that they always ask for, but it's, you don't get it until you ask for it in review. Sometimes that may happen. I didn't know that there was an update to this list or that kind of thing. So give you a couple minutes. Oh. This is what I had there.
Not everybody.
Right.
But otherwise. We're calling them the that friend. Yeah.
The transportation.
You start with- In case of jogs, anyone's still finishing up. Thoughts, a link for more information on landscape requirements for infill development. Link or more info, native plant material, more encouragement to use natives. Include more info on planting your overhead lawn. Less quantitative bean counting and more qualitative design. Need public space design guidance by type, park plaza, green space. Apply standards to civic buildings, fire and schools, etc. Maybe an enhanced design review or staff or planning. Enhanced design review, we're talking about like
Well,
a panel of folks.
right, rather than just kind of submitting a plan and it just gets reviewed by someone, you have DAP here. God knows I've been in this part of the building here so many times. But, and they get frustrated when they don't see the landscape being talked about as much. I'm a Bob Corbin, it's like, okay, what kind of trees there are and stuff. And it's not at that point because you're still a concept. You're not really quite even like an SD level drawing. So, and I know staff is overwhelmed. So, but they ought to really be at the table too, kind of working with applicants to get the plan to where it needs to be. Then it becomes more qualitative than quantitative. And I think that's what I think is missing here too. And public space design. I think the gentleman in the front talked about that. Montgomery County focuses more on quantity of space. How you fill it really becomes negotiated.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big difference rather than saying in that space you need, 3 trees for every 10 square feet or whatever the formula is.
Sure.
I think that's not really, doing somewhat of a disservice to the space because it might not need that many trees,
Sure.
or what have you. So,
Yeah, that's
so
definitely the bean counting approach versus.
right, but I think some guidance in there, and it could be, and I know these tend to be really general because you have to defend them too, in front of the planning and so forth. But I think that there ought to be some more of those, and it could be a lot of photos and diagrams as opposed to words.
Excellent. Credit for adjacent land use, i.e. neighboring open space with floodplain is still planted against. In terms of buffering, you're buffering from something that might even.
Doesn't need a buffer.
Your buffer is, yeah. Landscape fee in lieu of planting fund. Sometimes there are too many trees with all schedules. A way to address old street trees we're talking about. Excellent. Anybody else?
Page 16, forest conservation and landscape combination of 20% of the landscape needs to be much clearer. It is very vague. There's no talk whatsoever about where the surety, because there's like a double dipping that would happen there if those two are combined. So it needs to, you can go to the Forest Con manual and you can find it in there when you dig through looking for that. But that really needs to be redefined. It talks about 20% requirement, but it doesn't specifically say is that a 20% requirement of the landscape, 20% of the Forest Con. It just needs to be worded a little bit differently. And then it also, you would think that if you're using 20% of the landscape, then that 20% of the landscape is in the Forest Con and it would be covered in that forest conservation surety, but it's just the opposite. You subtract out the amount of square feet that is equal to the trees that are in the Forest Con, and you subtract that out of the Forest Con surety, and you leave the landscape surety alone. So, and none of that's spelled out.
Yes.
So that really needs to just be clarify, because we've done 3 or 4 now, and it's never been quite right. On different projects that, some did it one way, some did it the other, and so.
In
just
your experience, is it not clear on this end too, for the reviewers providing the?
Yes, yeah, I mean, there's been collaboration between different reviewers, and Brenda's kind of like the god in this department, so it's like, well, I talked to Brenda about this, and, and so, yeah, that's a big one that needs to be updated. It's a lot of money that gets involved when you are talking Forest County and landscape surety.
Yeah. So somebody.
I would just say a checklist, which it sounds like you've been touching upon, but to include all the requirements and the notes and then examples of the specific notes and development plans and their alternatives. And then HE setbacks is something. Thanks.
Next one would be, what are the conflicts? What, and someone mentioned one already, what conflicts you see between requirements within the manual? Or between other like forest conservation requirements, or stormwater management requirements? If there's anything that you're coming up against regularly that are conflicts between the current manual's requirements and other requirements, that we have to meet. What are conflicts between the landscape manual and other county departments? And then, we already spoke about it a little bit, but just for an example question, what conflicts exist between the current manual requirements and needs to consider subset or crime prevention through environmental design or other design, guidelines that we may need or want to consider. Oh, keep forgetting to check.
This is the first one, so we're supposed to be more.
Pretty good from your color.
And I was just gonna like, let's do another it's just to keep them separate so that we're describing later.
Chapman comment?
Yeah, we had one on the trees that came right. Oh, did you want that now?
Yeah, you want to cover that now while we're waiting?
Yeah. So Amanda Wagner from KCI Technologies, she suggested that we include plant suggestions for stream restoration sites. The plants have done well, live states in particular. What stormwater management on retrofits. She also said that the Maryland Aviation Authority has a specific wetland plant list that includes the hydrologic indicator status for each species. She agrees with adding links to native plant database websites and the addition of any seed mixes that have done well, either Ernst mixes or SHA mixes. And then if specimen trees must be removed to include mitigation requirements.
beyond what would be required for forest restoration.
Yeah.
And I think that is there's additional ones.
Right, if a plan doesn't have to address what's gone, then it can address trees
Oh.
in general, so there's a copy on. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do we have any online ones? You can start talking about, some of these is, one of these has already been brought up a little bit with the last comment, but credit for landscaping within a forest con easement, if the easement is an entire perimeter, but can only account for 20% of landscaping. So that relates back a little bit to what you were saying earlier, a way to handle that, potentially. Sometimes there are conflicts between the home buyer and the developer. And I'm assuming you mean in terms of like what's,
So the home buyer's living there,
Yeah.
and the developer comes back to put in the perimeter
Yeah.
trees.
They're
And
like,
they say, well,
I
that's where I'm gonna put my pool in 2 years.
yeah, we heard that last week. The county folks as well. Conflict between house connections and trees, is that like utility
Mhm.
connections? Conflicts between planting areas and DPW maintenance obligations. And then another one is potential overplanting conflicts with green neighborhoods. Do you want to elaborate on?
Sure, we have a project that we're working on for like 10 years now. That, and it's green neighborhoods. In order to get some of those credits, you have to enhance the landscape in some places. Well, we're having really issues trying to jam trees in on certain sites. There are a lot of multi-family sites on there. That was a huge problem, I thought, because it really kind of, it encouraged overplanting in order to achieve a credit. And I don't think that's necessarily the goal. For some of that. I'd like to also comment about the FAA thing, because that is a real thing that you have to, that trumps even Howard County manual in terms of what kind of trees you have to plant. Yeah. And on the eastern part of the county, it's more of an issue because that's where the flight zones are. But they change too, which is again kind of dumb because of, you get approved 1 year and then the flight path changes and then, so it's a little useless, but you have to abide by it because it's a federal thing. So.
I'd like to follow up on John's comment about the conflict between somebody's now in the house and the trees haven't been planted yet. Do you have any ideas how we can resolve that? 'Cause that's been like an ongoing.
So I guess what we do now is we end up moving the tree, that day they end up moving the tree and then we relocate it. And we come back and do a red line revision and just hope for the best, basically, when we listen to the county. And generally it has worked out.
So is there a resistance from the developer to put the trees in before they actually sell off the lots? 'Cause
Yeah,
usually the
so-
landscape,
They get run over, they get damaged, things like that by the home builder.
is it because the sequence as we approve the landscape plan and then they do a mass grading, but they haven't built the house because the buyer's gonna choose what house they want?
Right.
Okay.
So the developers there, doing that mass grading exercise and some of the stormwater management and some of that stuff. But then they basically give the lots over to the home builder
Mhm.
and the home builder does whatever they want to them. They don't have an obligation for those perimeter trees, but they're not their trees. And then the developer comes back after that and plants the trees, after the builder's out of there.
Okay.
Just to
So
make sure the trees are okay when they're planted, because they're, they got a surety out.
that's exactly.
I think when I was on your side, I can.
We're still on the same page. That's why we're all in this room.
I can see your point of what you're saying, but
Yeah.
now that I'm on the opposite side, if that were to be done, like the trees planted, I could see so many of them just being dug up and they wouldn't survive the
Right.
construction part of it.
Right, is there an opportunity to better enhance communications between the developer and the builder so that they know these trees are coming in and as soon as you start pouring the foundation and you get your
rough grade done, let us know, we'll come plant the tree, so that way the buyer sees them before.
I think the home builder is gonna do what they wanna do up
Yeah.
until they get the UNO, and then they're gonna try to do as little as they can after the UNO is issued, right?
Right.
So I think their incentive is to do it as fast as possible. And then sod it can be done.
Thanks.
I-
I don't know what the solution is yet, I just was hoping you had some on this.
So from different examples, I can throw some out here. One is to pair or only have those buffer yards in open space, right? So either 10 foot or 20 foot open space strip behind the residential lot is one way to do it. The other way to do it is place a covenant on the homeowners themselves so that they recognize that there will be plantings after the construction of the home. Two is that you don't have, or I guess the third one is really that you don't issue a UNO until the landscape material has been installed. That way they can't move in until it's there. I've seen different jurisdictions do this different ways, but those are the three that come to mind.
Thank you.
Any other conflicts or related comments? To share thoughts, experiences? Anything else on mind before? Okay.
I'm sorry, I just want to
Yes.
reiterate the comment that gentleman brought up earlier about some of the plant quantities not
Yeah,
working
yeah.
out. I think that was a really good point.
Well, my review.
That's my best point today.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
Once a homeowner moves in, it's his house, his or her house.
Mhm.
And to me that, and I'm sure you've heard this, that I own the house. And it's now mine, and the date they close, they own the house. But it could be 6 months or more till further landscaping goes in and others. And so this is where the pool is gone. I've decided that someone else raised that point. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm gonna put my fence, and they're gonna go right on the property line, and if it's going through a tree that was intended to be on the property line in order to be equally shared by both adjacent homeowners, you know, which, as you know, affords that tree some protection, because neither homeowner can take it down without the other's permission. The homeowner who's moved in first says, you know, it's my house, I'm doing what I want. Anyway, I mean, you know, you hear versions of that. I do know that, yeah, of course, so. I didn't mean to bring up a sore subject. So the trees go by the wayside, you know, eventually. And then they argue about the bond release, and then it's up to the courts.
That's it.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So basically, what haven't we asked you about? And some may have popped up in previous comments, but what are your frequently asked questions during the design and review process? I mean, what are you having to ask or have conversations with the reviewer frequently about? When some of these, once again, have already come up, so this is your opportunity to add in any other concerns as well. But what issues are you running into during construction and or after substantial completion that may be able to be addressed earlier via, you know, we're here to talk more specifically about the landscape manual, but and then, you know, any suggestions that you have about similar issues? Or is there anything that we haven't touched on yet? So,
I guess something we touched on earlier, just with the VGE zones and planting smaller trees underneath the overhead lines. They look good. The smaller trees do a lot of positives for the landscape. They don't end up being super tall, but I think sometimes when you have a super tall street tree, it ends up only screening its trunk area, you know, everything's above that. And these smaller trees, they screen a broader area from the frontage standpoint. But we're penalized, you know, we gotta do them at a higher density than we do with the larger street trees, so.
so maybe.
I would look at
Credit
a
or
river birch in front of my house than a tulip poplar, you know?
You're saying whether there might be an opportunity for a developer, or for someone to put in large larger trees, where those larger trees would be inappropriate, like under a power line. There is now an obligation to put 2 trees in for that one, which is hindering, maybe there should be a credit in that situation.
Yeah, we did actually a subdivision that had the Blossoms for Hope. I don't know if you're familiar with that program, but there were cherry trees, blooming cherry trees.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. That's a small tree. So
Right.
they ended up putting a higher density, but it's absolutely gorgeous looking, especially going to bloom.
Cool.
They had to put more trees in because they were doing a smaller tree.
Sure. Good point.
I'd like to ask the group, other than landscape architects, are there any other professionals that should be allowed to prepare landscape plans? And in specific, the county manual kind of allows if someone is developing a single lot that, they don't need to go hire a landscape architect to show the couple of trees. So we've been kind of flexible on that. And if you're familiar with the CPH program, with landscape designers, if there's any certified landscape designers that could do smaller scale plans, how would the group feel about that?
Well, I still think that the LA ought to see these drawings regardless. The small thing, the small lot. Maybe there's an exception for like a small lot, but not an estate lot. It's not something huge. I think that they still ought to have a website. I also think that the LAs ought to be reviewing it too. Conversely, if I'm going to seal a drawing, it'd be nice if someone that's viewing this drawing also can seal drawings. So I think that's my opinion on that one. Aaron, you might talk to the state board of licensing on that, because there might be a state law that kind of comes into play on who can sign off on something like that. With regards to liability or anything else. Might have your attorney look at that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not every planting plan that we've done involves health, safety, and welfare, but certainly a lot of them do, and one day may. If you're putting plants in there blocking sight distances that are creating unsafe conditions for traffic, for pedestrians, for kids on a school yard. So those are all things that, as a professional, we're certifying that we stand by that design where that opportunity might get missed for someone. Share my opinion.
You're part of this focus group.
Plenty of opportunity to share my opinion.
And I have to be some of these concerns too. I would avoid standard details because there's no standard condition, frankly. I'm a horticulturist too. So, and I would avoid that because oftentimes, just like the Public Works Manual, they just, a lot of our engineering friends will just take those and just slap them on the drawings and so forth. And that's the last thing you want to do. You have to really kind of follow good horticultural practices and really fine tune any kind of planting detail that you might have in there. This is a big one for me. It's a bit of a pet peeve, but feedback is a gift, and I'm in a giving mood right now. But so I would prohibit these Filterra things.
Yeah,
they're horrible. You put them on streets, and it's the worst thing for pets because they put a red bud in it. You can't. They block pedestrians essentially. They're just horrible. They don't belong anywhere near a street. You can put them out of view, but I don't think they belong on the street, and they're popping up everywhere in the county. Horrible. They're ugly, and they conflict with pets.
I don't, again,
You can
personally,
agree.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. I don't like the way they look myself. It looks like somebody left a manhole cover off and a tree happened to grow. In my opinion. But, I do know, I think from a stormwater design standpoint, it is a very quick, boom. And so it's very tempting, I think, for folks to put those on plans because they're, the design piece, it's cutting a huge corner. But it kind of looks like it is too, so.
Well, red buds are not street trees.
Yeah, agreed. Good point. Thanks for giving.
Follow-up question on your no standard planting details. So I guess what's the solution to that? Having someone on the reviewing end, making sure that it meets some level of standard?
Yeah, like I
What
said,
would that
everything's
be?
different.
Yeah.
You're planning on a slope, you're planning on different soil conditions, you might have depth issues, you might be putting in a tree pit, you might be putting in an EST. But you know, the conditions are endless, so why put a typical? You've got an evergreen tree, you have, you know, a number of ways of staking, maybe you spaded a tree in, you have a different way of staking.
Mhm.
So there's so many different conditions, especially the urban stuff. I mean, you really can't, you know, you don't know what the urban soils are gonna be like, you know, and then you're putting in a standard detail. I don't mind the qualitative kind of details, distance between curb or street face, for example, distance from a foundation or something like that. That kind of illustrates that makes that point. But don't put in there how to plant the tree and what kind of mix to put in and how deep to do it and all that good stuff. They put a big saucer on it, how big, you know, there's so many different variations and it's hard to really pinpoint which one on this one. And like I said, someone will just take that as gospel and pop it on a tree, on a plan, and just walk away. Just like they do a curb inlet or anything from a public, because you can see a lot of the engineering drawings are just nothing but just like the same thing out of the manual.
Quick follow-up question to that. Don't disagree. And I feel like it's like it's a bad analogy, but a speed limit sign. There are times where it's appropriate to go a little faster than that or a little slower than that, but it helps us all hold each other accountable to a bare minimum standard. How do we handle the situation where someone's going to do much less than what is shown on that detail?
Well, but staff needs to intervene, I guess, at that point.
So I think in that case, it becomes a site inspection issue. And becomes a much more holistic issue. I heard a lot of folks who were last week on that, you know, who are responsible for that piece. Commenting about the amount, the ability that they have to enforce things or the challenges they have, so.
It's a fine line, even kind of with the formulaic stuff, you know, I get it, because I think it kind of sets a kind of a very minimal standard.
Yeah.
But then when you think about Columbia and how it kind of came about and HRD and alternative compliance and so forth, you know, the reason I think Columbia looks the way it does is because of, you know, someone counting all the trees and saying you need an extra one, because of Dennis Dunn. It was kind of, he was like the form-based code for landscape in Columbia. It had to get past him, and he was the one that really kind of formed it. That's why it looks so much lusher than other parts of the county. That's why the streets, well, the landscape in general is very bucolic. Columbia is very bucolic in that regard. But so it's a different standard. That's why I think he didn't follow by a formula. He went by your negotiator, and that's why I think it's far more effective if the end result is beautiful landscape.
Any other thoughts like to share with that? We have,
This is the email address, landscape manual at howardcountymd.gov. So,
if you want to share these questions or your experience back at your offices, if you have any others that might be able to say, hey, I have some thoughts on this, feel free to have them send comments as well. And I will probably do a little shred in our office at some point. So.
Is there going to be an opportunity to submit a formal public comment? Is there a hearing, for example? Is there going to be a hearing?
So we have one more focus group next week. That'll be the public one. It'll be one similar to this. I am expecting a big turnout and a lot of responses from the public on that. So that'll conclude phase one, and we'll get a report that kind of will synthesize everything. The next phase, we'll be looking into the different manuals we've talked about, and then at the end, there will be drafts. The third phase will be drafts. I do believe, and I'm sorry, I'm not the decision maker, but my vision would be that we would put the drafts up and public comment could come in through the website for that. Whether or not we have an actual meeting or something for that,
That hasn't been decided, so.
You mean to the elected officials?
Right, well, once we-
Planning board, they won't be reviewing.
No, I don't think it goes to planning board, I'm not sure on that, don't hold me to that, but it does go to council. They need to adopt.
So there would be public comment at that point too.
Probably, according to the council process.
I won't come with a pitchfork.
No, but, we are gonna be looking for, comments as we do the drafts and that outline.
Well, I applaud your efforts in trying to revamp this thing, because it's really old and really it's not, it's. I don't know how effective it is.
Goal is to try and get perspectives from all angles as well, to see where the sticking points are and what can be done better, and so it's really great to have you guys all here as part of it. And seriously, if you guys have any other thoughts moving forward, feel free to share.
Thank you all for, we think of ways to break that 20% clause, Joanne, on page 16. A notebook full of page by page things that are, I don't think it's gonna be the same format. I think we're gonna come up with a new outline to add some flexibility into it. So, thank you all for participating today.
Yes, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.